Welcome back to Whip Count. On this episode, we're going to hear some reflections from Rep. Mara Gorman, who just concluded her first year as state representative. Rep. Mara Gorman represents the 23rd District, which includes western and northern side of the city of Newark, White Clay Creek State Park, and parts of Lower Pike Creek. She's a parent and advocate who has worked for years to end gun violence and foster inclusivity and racial equity in Delaware. And we are back with Rep. Gorman for a little bit of a recap of her first legislative session as a new legislator. So welcome, Rep. Gorman.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
So jumping right into things, you were new as a legislator, but you were not new to Legislative Hall. So can you start off by talking about some of the differences between coming from the advocacy world to being a legislator, maybe some expectations that you had and how they were met or not met?
Absolutely. So I was what you would call a single issue advocacy person, pretty much. Although gun violence intersects with many other things, that was primarily what I was focused on. And part of why I ran for office was because I was interested in addressing root causes, right? You know, poverty, education, homelessness, all these things that can lead to gun violence and increase in gun violence, mental health. So for me, one of the biggest shifts was just getting to focus on a breadth of issues as opposed to just one. And, you know, that has certainly proved to be the case. And I actually ended up spending time this session learning a lot, not only about the bills that I was working on, but everyone else's. And that was really fascinating for me. I loved it.
Well, you're talking about the breadth of issues and coming in during this first Trump administration. Obviously, it's like whack-a-mole every day with the priorities that are shifting and what you have to look into on that day. So what were some of the things that you ended up working on during this session?
So I focused a lot this session on helping our undocumented community. I wanted to make sure that people, Delawareans, that they were safe. And that we were respecting their civil rights. So a lot of the bills that I worked on focused on that. And that included a bill that banned 287G agreements, which are the agreements that ICE has been making with local law enforcement to have the local law enforcement officers do federal immigration work. I knew that Delawareans did not want this. That was very clear. A lot of law enforcement didn't want this. So by removing their ability to enter into these agreements, what we effectively do is say that the federal government is responsible for immigration enforcement, which is in fact the way that it is supposed to be, and that we're keeping our resources and our law enforcement focused on local issues. I also worked on a bill that would make it illegal to impersonate a federal law enforcement officer. We didn't currently have that in code. That became increasingly important after the unfortunate shootings of legislators in Minnesota, where there was someone who was pretending to be law enforcement, so it was very current and in the news. And finally, I worked on a bill that affirmatively bans citizens' arrests in Delaware. That actually helps a wide swath of our population because citizens' arrests tend to be tools of sort of racial malice a lot of times. They have their history in that and in lynchings. So by saying that we don't want to see anyone who is not law enforcement conducting arrests in Delaware, what we're essentially doing is saying we reject these old ideas of policing by the public.
Yes, and I want to add that your civil arrest bill, that was made Delaware the first state in the country to actually outright ban it. So
yes.
As a freshman legislator, that's huge. And I know a lot of your colleagues that were freshmen also took on some ambitious priorities. So what was it like working with them, and what was it like integrating into the General Assembly?
So I loved working with my class, as they call us. What a great group of people, a diverse group from different backgrounds, from different parts of the state. Getting to know each other was really fun and interesting. I didn't know really any of them before, with the possible exception of Representative Burns. I really hadn't worked with any of them before. So that, you know, I loved like talking about our ideas, talking about what we were working on. Representative Ross Levin had all these great ideas about, you know, equal rights for women and girls, you know, and we'd get really fired up. Her office was next to mine, so we would chat about that. So yeah, it was really great. And of course, Rep. Ortega and I were able to work together on some of these immigration issues because that was a big concern in his district. So, and I share an aide with Rep. Smith, And so that's been kind of nice too, because I sort of know what she's working on, and she's got some, I don't want to spill her tea, she's got some very exciting things coming down the pike. She's really been someone who's been sitting and observing and has come up with some really fantastic ideas.
Well, hopefully we can talk to Rep. Smith soon and hear some of her ideas. But what are your ideas moving forward into this next leg of the General Assembly? Because we still have a year left. Now you have some experience, how to get things done. Are there any priorities that you're going to be working on that you can share with us today?
Sure. So I do have some additional immigration-related bills on the docket. I have a bill that would prevent civil arrests at courthouses, and I'm looking actually at expanding that to other administrative bodies. Like the Labor Department has bodies where people have workforce accidents and they go in there, and it's a similar thing, but it's not in a courthouse. So that bill may shift and change a little bit, so I'm working on that right now. I also have a bill that would ban private prisons in Delaware. We don't currently have any, and as we've seen in other parts of the country, some of the private prisons that have been built lately primarily for the detention of the immigrant population are not great. So we really don't want to see those here in Delaware. So this bill would prevent that from happening. I also have a bill that would introduce primaries into special elections. Currently, when people run, in the case of a special election, kind of whether we know that it's going to happen in advance or not, they're basically picked by each of their respective parties, by small committees of people. And I don't feel like that's a very democratic process, small d democratic process. So I have introduced a bill that would require the permission, the use of primaries in special elections. And we've seen a lot of special elections, including one this summer.
We have.
So it's definitely relevant, and I'm looking forward to getting that across the finish line. So those are some of the things that I'm working on.
We were joking that it was a special summer, it was a special elections, a special sessions. As you know, we recently went back for reassessment and property tax issues. So this year we've had a lot of constituent-driven issues. What is it like going into your district? I know you had former Representative Paul Baumbach was your predecessor, and he was, of course, very involved. So what was it like coming after him and going back into that district?
So I will say I'm very fortunate to follow Rep. Baumbach because he's created so much good feeling in the district, and I took over his constituent coffees, which were extremely well attended and still are. I've maintained his sort of core crowd of people, which has been amazing. I also expanded and started holding meetings in the evenings. His coffees are in the morning with Representative Romer and Newcastle County Councilwoman Valerie George, and that's been really popular. So we've got like a new segment of people who are coming to those, and I've really enjoyed that too. And I have definitely gotten to know my district better. Like, I honestly recommend to anyone who wants to know the place they live better, run for office, local office.
I'm sure there's easier ways to know where you live.
Well, sure, but if you have the time, it's just really great to like really get to know what the names of all the neighborhoods are and what their characteristics are, and to know what people's concerns are. Like, you mentioned the Delmarva bills and the property tax issues that we had special session about. A concern right now in my district is the SEPTA trains, because they do come to Newark, and I've learned a number of people who live in my district who really rely on those trains. Now, I don't necessarily have an impact over whether that will get funded because it's Pennsylvania, but having that on the radar and knowing that that's going to be something I have to pay attention to and make sure that we have adequate public transportation, to meet the needs of that population, I wouldn't have thought of that before. Another thing that's been really great is getting to know some of the nonprofits. So I got to know the people who are running the Newark Area Welfare Committee, which is a long-standing nonprofit that works with organizations like the Food Bank of Delaware to feed Newarkers. And they actually have been so popular that they've recently opened a satellite to their food pantry that they have on Main Street for people to come and get food. So like knowing what the needs are, knowing who's doing that work. I mean, I was aware of it before, but I feel like more connected to it now. And I really, really like that. And it's, I put my cell phone on my business card because I want people to be able to reach me. I have no problem with talking to people and having them know who I am and that I'm there for them.
So it's been almost a year that you've been in office. People might not know this, but in Delaware, right after Election Day, you assume office. You might not get sworn in until January, but you are the representative starting that day. So after a year, is there anything else we didn't touch on that you wanted to reflect on or share?
I think that one of the things I would like to reflect on is just how small Delaware is. And we talk about that all the time, but since I've been in office, just the number of connections that there are, I don't know that people are fully aware that they're representatives, how closely we are all working together and with community partners, with agencies, with the wonderful staff in Lake Hall. We are not just operating within our own districts. We really, truly are connecting all the time with people all over the state. And I feel really, really fortunate to live in a small state. I like that a lot. I have a hard time imagining what it would be like to live in a state like Pennsylvania, where you don't even necessarily know all of your colleagues in your legislative body. So I've come to treasure that even more since I've become a legislator, knowing that I love the 23rd, I love my district and the people I represent, and I love being a part of this sort of statewide connection and coalition of people.
Well, thank you so much. It was so great talking to you. Hopefully we'll have you back to talk about some of the other initiatives you're working on, hopefully in the second leg of the 153rd General Assembly.
I would love that.
From the Delaware House Democratic Caucus, this is Whip Count. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things happening in Legislative Hall. Until next time.